Hello and welcome to the Gilbert and Singh podcast episode number 6. Hit the subscribe button if you've listened to us previously and would like to listen to us in the future, and you can keep up to date what we're doing. Jas, I'd like you to introduce our guest.
Again, thank you, George, for the nice introduction. I'm actually really excited about this one because I've got a good friend of mine today, a person that I've actually gone to for advice on a regular basis. I've got
relationship advice?
I hope not.
I'd be a terrible person for that.
Yeah. So, Taimoor, please be about yourself. Thank you for coming. Yeah. Thank you for accepting our invitation.
Yeah.
So a bit more about yourself, please, if you can.
Yeah. So hi, guys. Good to be here. Thanks for having me on this amazing podcast. I can't wait to hear the rest of them as well. My name is Taimoor. I live in Dubai and have been here for about 8 years. I work in technology. I work for a large US technology software company called Microsoft. You might have heard of it.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
It's come up a couple of times in our...
Yeah. So I've been with them for about 11 years now. And before that, I was with another technology company called Cisco.
Oh, wow.
Some big names.
Yeah, so I've been in the space for a while. I lived in Silicon Valley most of my adult life after college, basically, and then somehow made a stupid decision to move to Dubai. So here I am.
Well, I mean, let me off the bat then. How do you go from Silicon Valley to what, Dubai?
You know, it was time for a change, and it was I'd lived in one area of the world for a long time, and I thought I'd go see the world, and I decided to come here where it's 48 degrees.
Yeah, it's horrible at the moment.
48 degrees on a
at night,
day.
midnight.
Yeah, on a normal day.
When the sun's gone.
Yeah.
When if 50 on a regular day.
And you walk outside and you've sand in your eyes, and it's fantastic. Yeah.
So did you come here with Cisco then?
No, with Microsoft.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I've been in Microsoft for 11 years, been here for 8. So I worked in Microsoft for about 2 or 3 years there, and then I came over.
Fine. And was that when Microsoft was setting up an office here?
No, we already had a big office here. We've been in the region for about 18 years, 20 years. It's kind of interesting. I don't actually work with the local region at all. I just kind of am based here. I have a global remit. I look after some strategy work globally for a piece of our SaaS offering. So we have a SaaS platform in Microsoft, and out of that SaaS offering, which is Office and stuff, and out of that SaaS offering, we have a collaborations group, and I look after strategy for them, but on a global level. So most of my and Jess knows this because I'm out of town most of the time. So I travel a fair amount, 50 to 60%. I'm kind of out of the country.
He's not an easy man to get in touch with.
So you got some serious air miles then?
I have some serious air miles, which, by the way, are absolutely pointless currently.
Well, I was traveling a lot. I got to Gold, but I was doing a lot of the GCC flights, and on average, there's probably 60 to 70 Golds. So the chance of an upgrade, forget it.
Yeah, but again, COVID's not helped your air mile situation, has it?
It has not. I came in March 11th, and I haven't left yet. And it's very strange for me because for me, before I would even get back, I would have the next 2 already in my calendar, and now I'm just sitting around.
Yeah, I mean, that, like I said, he's not a very easy person to get in touch with because. Again, I've actually got in touch with... so when I started my tech platform, or when I started researching into this, the first person I got in touch with was Taimoor. I'm like, Taimoor, Microsoft, I need some opinions on what I'm doing, if I'm doing it right. And he's been of great help. You mentioned that you do mentor programs as well for startups. So how does that work? What would you mentor them about here, or is it in Silicon Valley?
Yeah, so since I've been living there for so long, I've got a good network of people that I know. A lot of my friends have moved on to be entrepreneurs, and some of them have been very successful as well. So mostly Silicon Valley. I don't really do any work here with the startups and stuff. And it's mostly in the capacity of my friends who are, or some people who know about me or have heard about me from previous experience that I've got, who've asked to provide some directional advice and guidance. And sometimes it's technical because of technical focus. Sometimes it could be directional, strategic. I also have a good amount of people that I know that work in venture capital. And so sometimes they also reach out to say, hey, one of the things is, and we were talking about this earlier, kind of riffing, is the difference between venture capitalists in Silicon Valley and anywhere else, even like if you think about technology hubs like New York or Austin or London or some in Asia. I think the big difference is that venture capital is not just about money. A lot of people think that venture capital is you go pitch to some investors and they just throw some checks at you and then you walk away. Venture capital has really evolved into a lot of advisory, a lot of incubation kind of stuff. And that's super important as well for a young startup. A lot of times, especially in Silicon Valley, the kids that are coming up with these startup ideas are fantastic with technology. They can do anything with a computer, but they don't really have the business know-how to go to market with that particular product or service. And so, venture capital plays a pretty important role in guiding that whole process to figure out, okay, you've got a great idea. Is it marketable? Is it going to make money? Is it what the market looks for? And so on. So that's kind of a different spin, I think, to venture capital. And I think that it'll take time to develop something like that because that only comes from experience, right?
Are these venture capitalists fair? Because you've got the young guy, he doesn't really understand business, but he does the tech side. Are they fair in saying, okay, what we're going to do, we're going to position you with this percentage of the business and we're going to take this? I mean, because they're not really going to know. I mean, do they take advantage of those situations?
Yeah, that's the flip side of it, right? So Silicon Valley venture is really cutthroat. Like if you look at the big firms like Andersen or Y Combinator or something, they get like hundreds of pitches a day, right? So it's not easy to sort through that. And so sometimes they have these formulas that they've got in their head that we're going to eliminate it based on this. And because the competition is so high, you don't really know what's going to make the cut. It could be a great idea that got cut, right? And so therefore raising capital outside of Silicon Valley is actually easier now for some of the tech entrepreneurs, especially New York. New York's become a pretty big hotspot of raising capital in tech enterprise. A little bit different in terms of the kind of work that they're doing. But yeah, I think that's the flip side is sometimes the venture capitalists can be a little bit biased towards either their own predispositions or somebody they know, and that.
So if, like you said, a good idea could get caught, right? But this is according to the venture capitalist that it could get caught, but you think it's a good idea. What do you do then? So do you continue going to VCs and say, listen, I've got a great idea?
Keep trying, right? So it's famously known that Uber and Snapchat went to up to 60 ventures until they got their first round.
Yeah, I think Uber failed 3 times, wasn't it? Uber launched 3 times, I thought.
No, Uber, but yes, they did have a few launches, but they went to dozens of investors. Snap also went to dozens of investors before the first guy. I mean, they were kicked out. They were like, this is a pretty bad idea.
It's crazy. I mean, Netflix got kicked out by Blockbuster. Yeah, that was it. That's crazy. No, so you mentioned the whole Silicon Valley thing. Like Dubai is obviously moving towards a whole startup hub kind of thing here. They've got Mubadala, Hub 71 in Abu Dhabi. So they don't want to be competing with Silicon Valley. They want to be better than Silicon Valley, right? So how do you? What difference do you think would be? What's the biggest difference? Obviously, the cultural difference is a massive thing here. But other than that, what was the difference in the market here and there?
I think, we have to realize Silicon Valley came about because of 2 really amazing educational institutions, right? So if you think about Stanford and Berkeley being about 20 minutes away from each other, I think that's where most of the innovation sparked from and where all these kids came from. So, I think harboring and investing in talent is going to be the number one thing that any market has to do to be able to attract that kind of person. They've got some really great educational institutions here that are providing that level of education. But still, I think it's a long ways if you think about, if you've ever heard about origin stories from like a Google or a Facebook or an eBay or a Cisco, you'll really rapidly realize that these were all done on university campuses, right? They all started from Stanford campus. The Google guys met at Stanford. Cisco started because a guy and a girl wanted to talk to each other between buildings, right?
Well, I didn't know that. That's actually sick. I didn't know that.
So, and they were both working in Stanford in different research departments. So I think that, a lot of innovation comes from really solid advice from professors and some research projects from masters and thesis programs from.
Right. So education. So like, obviously, this is what the first question was, right? The mentor program. When you teach someone how to do this properly, they learn. They're like, oh, how do you select I come up to an idea and you say, no, I don't want to be a part of this because I don't think this is going to work. Do you have that kind of disposition against an idea, or you say, you know what, I'll teach you anyway, regardless of what the situation is?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's, teach is a big word. So I think that, for me, like if I have some experience, either learning about it or either doing something on my own, I've actually dabbled in a couple of startups myself as well. I'm happy to share my experience, and that's kind of how I view it. I don't think I select anything. I think people come to me to talk to me, and if they want to do it in a formal capacity or informal capacity, that's fine. I'm happy to talk to anybody. But I think that I think it's super important to know what works up front, right? And I think that your initial team of people is super important. If you have a good you could have a fantastic idea. You could even have a lot of money behind it. But if you don't have the passion and dedication that it takes to drive, because you're probably going to fail a few times, even with that same idea, until you fine tune it into something that's going to work. Very few people have just hit the ball out of the park on their first idea. And those are the unicorns, right? Those are the Facebooks of the world and so on. But in general, if you look at what a company used to be, even Uber as an example, right? Uber used to be when it started, their goal and their first pitch deck is available online. I encourage everybody to go take a look at it. In fact, the top 30 Silicon Valley companies' pitch decks are all online, right? LinkedIn, Airbnb, Facebook.
Oh, brilliant! I didn't actually know that.
Yeah, you can go down. I send you a link to all of them. There's a person that's collected all of them and put them on their very first pitch decks that raised their Series A. And so you can take a look at it and you can see how they've moved away from what they imagined them to be. Uber used to bill itself as the luxury private vehicle for the ultra rich to go to dinner parties and stuff, right? It was never a commodity service that anybody can be an Uber driver sort of thing, right? But they evolved that, right? They saw the model, it worked, and they said, so the point is that, you've got to have a right mindset. A lot of people get stuck with saying, okay, this is it, this is what we're going to do. And
so you got to adapt to, as the time progresses as well. With your idea, you need to know.
And market conditions too. Like right now, a couple of companies that I'm working with, COVID has come up, and if you were a company that were planning to sell something in brick and mortar stores as a startup, well, guess what? Like your business model is completely changed. Yeah. And you've got to think about how to, improve your channel or whatever. So there's a lot of adaptability is a big part of it. And that's kind of where the advice comes in. So if a venture capitalist board sits with you and gives you advice, and I've seen a lot of kids just walk away and say, hey, no, I don't want your money if you're going to try and control my product and so on.
It's a bit like Shark Tank.
Yeah,
it's a small example of kind of pitching
like Shark
to
Tank.
A VC.
Yeah, if somebody's giving you money, they're going to want to have input, and you've got to be able to listen because they bring the experience, right?
I think it's an interesting conversation because we had this conversation with a sales teacher, as you may, or sales guru. He pointed out that you need to have a thick skin when you're doing sales. So this is what you're doing in retrospect. You're selling your idea to someone. You got to have thick skin because you're going to hear so many no's, so many. No, you got a problem with this. This is not going to work. This is not going to work. How do you psychologically just go to a point where I can't do this anymore? What's the limit? Where do you go? I can't do this. I'm done. I break.
Yeah. Or is there a point where the idea actually isn't going to work?
Isn't going to work. Yeah. How do you know where? How do you actually teach that? Well, not teach again. I'm sorry to use that word. Do you advise them on this as well? Be like, listen, maybe the idea is not good enough. Is that a conversation you've had before with someone?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, you have to, right? Because a lot of times people fall in love with their idea, and I love the passion that sometimes people have to say, "Hey, this is it. This is," and sometimes maybe it's very relevant to their life, but it may not be a marketable like mass. And you've got to realize that this is a small market. You may not make a lot of money, but at least you'll have a product, right? I have a friend of mine who left his big consulting job and started making apps. because he felt like he actually started making apps, and now he's in gaming, which he's doing really well with. But he said, "Oh, I'm going to make these apps," and the ideas that he had were really niche to small market, but it applied to him, and that's why he fell in love with them. But the idea is that you've got to be able to understand that if you have a particular idea for a service, it may not be a mass market idea, right? Not everybody's going to come up with the next iPod or the iPhone or whatever, right? But there are so many other niche markets, niche products, niche services that you can give. It just comes down to your motivation. If you're trying to solve a particular problem, or if you're trying to bring something into this world that caters to this, and then you feel really passionate about it, go for it, right? But you have to separate that from making money. A lot of people do it for, this is my idea that will make a lot of money and I'll become rich, right? So if you think about what you want to do, there's a lot of ways to get rich, right? You don't have to fall in love with an idea. You don't have to be in a startup. There's a bunch of different ways to do that.
I'd love to know one of them.
So would I.
Yeah, I mean, that would make my life a lot easier as well. I wouldn't have to go look for investors.
Yeah. So it really makes a difference on what your motivation really is to go into anything.
Well, again, you mentioned you should have a bigger idea in terms of not just making money, because, like you said, you can make money through wherever. I can open a cleaning shop, or with the COVID situation, sanitization shop as well, and I could make money from that. So if your aim is to do well for other people, I think that would be a starting point in terms of looking, if you have a base for an idea, see if this benefits the people around you. Are you going to use this idea yourself? Are there any other things that you should be looking at when you're thinking of an idea? Again, like I said, ideas a dime a dozen. Everyone's got an idea. Right? You could have an idea for washing your pants, for cleaning your house, for whatever. How do you go on validating your thing? But like, you know what, this is what we need to do. This is going to work. Do you have to carry out a lot of market research? Do you do it yourself? Do you go to companies that will help you with this? Again, because as a startup, initially you want to cut costs, right? So as someone who advises on startups, would you suggest to people when they come up to you and say, listen, I've got an idea, but I need to do this. I need to do market research. What's the first thing that you tell them?
Yeah, I think that the difference is, again, what I was saying earlier is, there's some things that are big ideas, and there's some things that are just ideas, right? And it has nothing to do with actually the impact of the size of the impact. It's got to do with volume, right? With people. This is UAE, for example, is a relatively small market, right? You've got about 2 million market penetration in the UAE of people who are, going to be averse to technology and so on. I'll give you an example. There's a company here called Kafu, if you guys have heard of it.
Right? Yeah. Fuel filling.
Fuel filling, right? And so, fantastic idea, right? If you think about and the reason it's going to work and be successful here is because the logistics and operations of the UAE or even Dubai is smaller. And so you don't need 100 vehicles, you don't need 2,000 staff to be able to provide a ubiquitous service. And you have to provide a ubiquitous service because if I use Kafu and if the guy is at my doorstep in half an hour, I'm never going to use them again, right? And you need to be able to do that initially. And compare now Dubai to a place like Bombay or Delhi, right? And if you think about the scale at what needed to happen there for a fueling service like this, it would never work because you would initially have to invest so much money into it. Yeah.
Also, I think the culture thing comes in as well, where in India or any place like this, you would have the cultural problem where people don't want to do this. Where why should I do this? I'm okay. Go and obviously with the corruption. Let's not get into the corruption part of different countries.
But it's an important point, right? There is social dynamics. There is environmental stuff that has to align for you to be able to do that. I mean, Kafu is a fantastic idea. Who wouldn't, like, for the three of us, right? Who wouldn't want the convenience? Nobody wants to stand an hour. It's better now with COVID, but in general, I've stood in line for gas for 45 minutes.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely have. I don't feel it. Up at 2 in the morning.
But I get the lure. I get the idea behind it. I mean, you've just left work at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. You left work. You're pissed. You're annoyed. You've had a bad day. You don't want to spend 30 minutes in the line waiting for petrol. It's just easier. Be like, listen, on an app, come to my house, leave it open, done. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you don't want to take a detour. You don't want to be caught out of gas. You don't want to wait. I have waited a very, very long time for gas.
No, I believe you. Also, I think that going back to your previous point as well, you have to look for something bigger. I think in this case, with the world moving to a cleaner slate energy and all of the recycling, to reduce your carbon footprint. So have your cars drive less in terms of not being in a petrol station, just in general, that helps a lot for your overall picture as well. So it's a really interesting.
I would say what's challenging for them is that a lot of cars are parked in basement car parks.
Yeah, that's the big challenge.
That's going to be the difficult thing, is getting in and out. I mean, obviously they have an agreement with people that they can just swipe into car parks.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually didn't notice that before. I mean, I've seen the Carrefour thing before, but generally just around residential villas and not buildings.
Yeah, offices and like, for example, I see them around a lot. Internet City, Media City, all outdoor parking. It is a challenge for them for sure. They can't get into mall parkings, for example. If they could, that would be phenomenal. Go to the mall, get your car filled, get your car washed, get your car tinted. At the mall.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
No, that would be good.
Well, yeah. I got being everything in your palm of your hands is a luxury, right? So, and Dubai loves that, providing luxury.
Yeah, exactly.
To people,
On
right?
demand, everything. Yeah. I think this is the. It's interesting. I come from Silicon Valley, right?
And you've mentioned that a couple of times, yes.
Yeah, and so you would think that the technology adoption of all this stuff would be so much higher there, but it's actually not. Dubai, from what I've experienced myself, is the number one place where you can just get anything you want on an app.
Yeah,
like I can get my dry cleaner to show up at my door in 30 minutes.
Groceries, cleaning.
Like even if I need a toothbrush. It's actually quite, and this car fueling thing was a good, light bulb moment for me to say, hey, listen, everything on demand is actually a big thing, especially in this market over here. Even though we don't have the challenge of moving around. Like moving around is pretty, the streets are pretty big, the infrastructure is there. So you would imagine that people would be more likely to go out, step out and go get the stuff. But no, it's like the penetration for the apps is phenomenal here. And it's not even that high in Silicon Valley. Well,
that's crazy. I mean, that's how we started the initial topic. What's the biggest difference in terms of Silicon and Silicon Valley? And here it's this. It's just the fact that everything is click at your doorstep, don't have to do anything. Also, interesting, you mentioned Dubai market. We were talking about this before. We were talking about what's the next big thing Dubai is moving towards. All right, so in your opinion, I've seen a lot of fintech apps coming up here, fintech and marketplaces particularly. So what's your opinion on the fact that, do you think this is going to be a long-term thing where fintech is the next big thing, or is there any other industry that you'd be like, you know what, focus here? Because I remember, I had this conversation with Taimoor, I think a month ago. So he was one of the first ones to actually tell his close friends, go invest in Facebook. Invest in Facebook. Facebook's going to be massive. And this was what, 12 years ago?
God, that would be a good point to get in.
Yeah.
It was.
So he's had a couple of good tidbits over the years. He said Uber. I think Uber was one of them as well.
Well, yeah, Uber. I'm still looking for Uber but they haven't. The stock hasn't done well. But in general, I think Uber wants to branch out into other things like food deliveries and a bunch of other items. So I think they'll do well. Everything's kind of been derailed with COVID, of course, especially the transportation industry. So we'll see where that goes. But in general, coming back to your question about platforms, fintech is amazing.
What is fintech?
Oh, sorry. So for the people listening and for George here, it's tech platforms that work with finance.
Okay, all right, fine. So, I can't. Yeah, I thought maybe, but I thought I'd ask him.
So again, George, good question for the people listening. Yes, this is anything related to finance and a tech platform. It's called fintech.
Yeah. So basically digitizing your typical financial transactions not just at the back end level, which is all of course computerized, but also at the consumer end user level. So fintech is kind of exciting, but you have to realize that fintech comes with a lot of regulation. So finance industry is the most heavily regulated industry in the world, right? and it's controlled by these large investment banks, and it's controlled by governments. And so to really be flexible with fintech or to innovate in fintech, you've got to adhere to some of these regulations that are there. So it can be challenging. I'll give you an example. So the US has had fintech for a long time, and they've got platforms that can actually help consumers do a bunch of cool things. But even in a country like the UK, for example, fintech was really only deregularized about 2 years ago when the government said, okay, fine, we'll allow fintech companies to integrate into banks and get all the information and then be able to consolidate that information. So I think that regulation has to move around. There was actually a startup app here that somebody I know is starting. It's actually pretty good. It's called Amal.
I've heard of that one.
Yeah,
I've heard of that one.
And it just consolidates. So it connects to all your banks. So I didn't know this, but the UAE actually has a centralized identity mechanism to connect to banks, so that a service can connect on your behalf to a bank and get your information. And so it basically logs into all your bank accounts. So if you have an Emirates NBD account and a Mushrik account and a credit card from RAC or whatever, it'll connect to all of them and then bring in all your accounts and tell you, break down, this is how much you spend on food, this is how much you spend on car or whatever, right? So those are kinds of things that I think could be useful to get that data and insights.
That's a scary part. You mentioned data and insights. With a tech platform, security of data is such a big thing because everything about you is online, right? And that is such a big thing. So, have you seen anything in the market here with cybersecurity, or from your experience in Silicon Valley, how do you think people should incorporate that into their tech platforms, for example? Because it's such a big thing. Why?
For me, I think that I have a personal opinion on it that's not very popular. But
let's hear that one first.
Yeah. So my personal opinion is that I think people make a big deal about data privacy, and we already share pretty much everything about ourselves online.
Yeah.
Very true.
And it's a voluntary. Nobody forced us to join Facebook or LinkedIn or Instagram or any of the other social media platforms. And so when we voluntarily, put in all of our information, anytime you've put in your date of birth anywhere, like you've told people everything about you, like your generation, what you grew up with, what kind of music you like to listen to and stuff. And so I think data privacy is kind of, there's some people who are pretty anal about their data and their privacy, but I think that the advantage that we receive out of it, I'll give you an example. A lot of people are adverse to ads, and they're like, oh, Facebook is targeting me with these ads because of it thinks who I know, knows who I am. And I am of the opinion that I really, really wish that I would get targeted ads rather than, because I don't want an ad for aspirin all the time. I want an ad, for
after a night
for
out,
the Maldives, because that's what I've been talking about, or I want to go there. You know what I'm saying? Like, have you noticed this? If you talk and your phone is listening, and the next day on Instagram you'll get an ad.
So it is listening.
It is absolutely.
Yeah, I thought it would be.
Yeah.
And you coming back to the point you just made, the convenience. And I was thinking about doing a spa day with my other half.
On there.
And actually, like you say, I wanted it to tell me what deals are out there.
Well, it's funny because we did a podcast earlier this week. We had the CEO of Yalla Baby on as well. So George was like, I did a bit of research on the platform, see what they do, so that we can talk about this, which is interesting. And then next thing you know, we've got baby ads coming in, we've got diapers, and I'm like, that's the crazy part. So a picture that you like on social media can bring you so much information. So it's your choice. Actually, I kind of agree with him. It's your choice in terms of put your data out there.
Yeah, data privacy is it's a double-edged sword. Like if you don't share your data, if you don't want your data shared, well then you won't get the advantage of the technology innovation that can be brought, because there's so much to consume right there, and you can't consume all of it, right?
Yeah.
But there are some countries, like for example, Germany is very, very strict, right? EU just passed a whole GDPR thing last year, where data privacy is at the forefront of everything. Like data, it's got to be a user's consent to be able to do that. So all the services that you use in the EU are governed by this really strict law now around data privacy, which is fine. I think there's got to be a balance, is what I'm trying to say. You can't be like, oh, I want none of my data to be shared, and then you also want to say, oh, I want to be able to use Google in a free way.
TikTok or Instagram. Yeah,
exactly. So I think that in fintech, especially, there is a balance. Yes, I would love for a service app like Amal, for example, to be able to access my bank records and be able to pull the transactions that I make, if it can tell me that I'm spending too much money on food in a month, which I am absolutely doing.
Yes, same.
Right? So,
again, Dubai. Yeah, so you just
exactly.
you order food so much
I live
more.
alone. I go out a tremendous amount, and so those are the kinds of things that I'm happy to give my data away for, if that's going to make my life better. If it tells me, oh, you filled up 4 tanks of gas this month, what the hell have you been doing? And it's clearly obvious because I'm not traveling. I'm going to be using my car.
Heavy right foot.
Yeah, exactly. Or that, yeah, exactly.
Well, no, but that's interesting because it gives you information about yourself as well. Again, like you said, double-edged sword. If you have data, you can make informed decisions, and that is the best part about getting your data collected in one place.
Yep.
Obviously, double-edged sword. They can use your data, but again, I agree with him. It's not like someone in the CIA, if anyone's listening, is interested in someone in Dubai living in Dubai.
But every large company has been in trouble for data violation. Like Facebook has
recently,
paid over
I saw the court case.
Billions of dollars.
Yeah.
Microsoft has paid billions of dollars. Google has paid them. So Amazon just had a big data breach with Alexa stuff. So I'm just saying, like, every company struggled with this. I think the corporate responsibility that these companies have is that even if they are taking your data to better enhance their products and services, I think I'm okay with that. I'm okay with Google having my data, for example, or Facebook having my data. But it's also responsible for them to take care of it, to make sure that it doesn't get stolen, it doesn't get hacked into, like if I have credit card data in Amazon, like, do I really want somebody in China having that?
Do these big companies choose to breach these rules, or do they don't know that they're breaching the rules and then all of a sudden they're slapped with a fine?
It's the latter most of the time. I mean, I'm sure there's some unethical practices happening in some companies, but in general, as a general rule, like, I think it's become a serious enough issue where they just don't know, or they don't realize what's happening until it's happened. And that's why, like, a lot of people don't know this. The president of Microsoft is actually a guy named Brad Smith, and he is the head of our legal department. The legal departments of all these companies are so powerful and inform so much decision in what we do every single day. It's ridiculous. And it's the same for Amazon and Google.
Well, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, make your head of your legal department run the company so that he knows the in and outs of all the laws.
You have to be so careful now because companies could be ruptured financially.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Just, how they used to say any kind of PR is good PR? Yeah. I don't think that's the case anymore. So bad PR now is actually bad PR. Yeah. So if you're known for data stealing or racist,
spreads quickly,
racist comments, or I mean, the PC culture doesn't help, but that's a topic for another day and for another podcast. All right.
What about? Sorry, I was just going to say. I know a lot of people would be interested in this. What about Skype and what's Microsoft's relationship? Because it is Microsoft Skype, isn't it? What's the relationship with the government now? I mean, is Skype going to come in? Because a lot of people talk about the VIOP. I know I've gone off topic.
No. Let me add another one as well. Obviously, with Zoom coming up, all right. So how's that helped your Skype situation? Because I think Zoom hit 300 million users last month, I think. And that was the quickest someone's ever hit 300 million users. So, that's actually a really good question, George.
Things I can't talk about.
That's fair enough. That's fair.
But I will provide some color. So, I think that I think there's an interesting thing happening here with COVID, right? And it depends on which side of the fence you lean on in terms of the changes that have been brought about by COVID and how long they're going to last. Some people think that COVID is an event in time that's going to change the way we work, the way we live forever. I'm not one of those people, but in general, if you do believe that, then you think that we have to change. And we've seen it firsthand with the UAE government, where they previously didn't allow any of these, so-called communication apps to live and breathe and exist in the way that they do now. And they had to do that because, one day everybody was working from home.
Yep.
And so I think that I think some of it will stay. I think some of it is definitely positive. The official word on the UAE, from the UAE's perspective, is that they put the security and privacy of the people who live in the UAE first and foremost.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you think about services like the most ubiquitous service right now is WhatsApp, right? For both messaging and it's become really popular for calling, although, FaceTime and a bunch of others also take the calling thing away. And of course, Skype. So I think that their whole, the UAE government's whole mantra is about security and privacy. And until and unless they deem a service to be as secure and provide that level that they need to be able to make sure that everybody's safe, they don't want to allow it. But they also recognize this need now for business applications like Zoom or like our product, which is called Teams.
Well, I do actually like Teams. I've used Teams a couple of times. I
forgot about Teams.
Yeah, it's actually very...
And everybody seems to be using Teams.
That's great. Yeah. So Teams is my thing.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah. And Teams has done well. It's done really well. We've got, I think the biggest win we had with Teams, of course, we have a lot of enterprises using Teams and everybody seems to love it, which is fantastic for us. But the biggest win we had was over a weekend, we switched over 1.5 million students. So remember when in March, right after spring break, when everybody went to school, so we worked with the UAE Education Ministry, and every school under the Ministry of Education used Teams to do their distance learning program with their kids.
Wow.
And that was a big story. Like turning up 1.5 million users over a course of a weekend was a really, really big thing. And so we've seen, and you're right, Zoom has seen a tremendous amount of success. We have seen, tens of millions of added users since March.
Oh, wow.
We're looking at about 90 million daily active users now, and we were at 20 million in January. So if you just think about like just the growth of what that looks like,
that's insane. I mean, I think one of the best things for me in the lockdown, from the Teams perspective, was the fact that I could have all my friends in one screen rather than, shifting through. If you've got 8 people, you've got to go 1, 2, 3, 4. With Teams, it was amazing because I've got my whole team there. Like you said, work experience as well. It changes because now you can talk to different departments and have all of them in front of you discussing. It's interesting times.
Yeah, I mean, it's in case you haven't noticed, the tech sector has done phenomenally well. There was a lot of panic when the pandemic set in to say, the economy is going to collapse and nobody's going to make money. But quite the opposite has happened, actually. There has been some sectors that have been really hit hard, like hospitality and transportation and so on. But the tech sector particularly, it's at all-time highs. Every single company that you pick up that has anything to do with anything remotely related to software or solutions that help people work in this new normal, which is what we call it, has done, tremendous growth.
I mean, Dubai, I think UAE has invested the most money they've ever done in tech platforms this year.
Of course.
Which makes complete sense. Because I follow a couple of these groups on Instagram, and they post all of these startups that get funding in series round A or B or pre-series, and some of the ideas there are, it's insane. So there's I marketplace where you can get your specs, you can get your classes. But you're right. It's just interesting to see so many investment going on.
It's amazing. If you think about, one of the things that was super cool for me was, when the lockdown started in Dubai, it was kind of sudden, right? It wasn't like you had a long notice on it. It was just like, okay, we're locking down. And if you realize what they did, they put a smart permit system where you had to go to a website, you had to
get
apply
permissions.
for a permit, and then it would SMS you back a code, and then you would apply for the permit, and in a few hours it would give you back your permit. Built within days. And if you would think about pre-COVID times, if a government or a public authority had to put something in place, that would be a year or 2 year project where they'd be feasible. But this, they had to do it in a few days, right?
They track and trace. They're tracking Al Hosn app, and that's their tracking. It came within a week.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great. I mean, so basically what it is you switch it on. If you've done the test, your thing, you have to keep your Bluetooth on, that's it. You've got the app, you keep your Bluetooth on as well. If you've got the test, if you're positive, I walk past you, I will get a message saying you've been tested positive for COVID. So I know now I can keep my distance within a week. That's insane. I mean, the infrastructure to do that, that's ridiculous.
And to scale it, right?
And to scale it to, to 8 million people in the UAE. That's insane.
Yeah. How are you going to look at that person knowing they've got COVID? Are you going to be like, you know, when you walk down the aisle in a supermarket and you're like to everybody?
Well, I think people have the tendency to overreact as well.
Yeah, initially when anybody would even cough or sneeze, just, you know, got something down my throat, like, oh my God, this guy.
Yeah. I mean,
run.
I think that's human tendency to just overreact in this situation.
Well, we didn't know a lot of the information was at that time all doom and gloom, and it was, you know, people dying, and
but you didn't know how serious this was, or this could be. All we knew it was bad, right? How bad? So again, human tendencies. But again, going back to the startup thing, there was a key thing that you mentioned early in the podcast. You said you could have a great idea, you could have the biggest investor behind you, but the team behind you, that is key to a successful tech platform or tech venture.
Yeah, I think it comes down to people always. Always. Like, you could even take an average idea or a mediocre idea, and you know, you probably see this in your daily life as well. You probably go down and be like, I could have come up with that. That sounds pretty simple and basic to do, but you know, it's the execution of that that really, really makes it.
Everyone's got ideas.
Everyone's got ideas.
So how do you? So this is the next thing. So how do you go on picking your team? I think this is such a key part. For example, me, right, if I have to go select a team for the recycling thing that I was doing, how do I go about? How do I know this is the right person for what I want to do?
Everybody's got their own philosophies on that. Like, I don't think you're going to get consensus. There's no formula. There's no winning formula.
Okay.
But you know, I'll tell you what my thing is. I think you have to have a really good balance of super smart people and
just Stanford and Berkeley,
wherever they've studied. I mean, Stanford, Berkeley, great institutions, but there are a lot of smart people who understand what needs to be done. But then you've also got to balance it with what I call street smarts, right? People who've grown up or grown up professionally and seen the experience that they bring, right? So I think you've got to marry those two people together, and you've got to make sure that they're flexible enough to listen to each other, because you know, it's one thing to be really, really, really smart and very opinionated and be like, this is it, this is how it's going to be. And we've got good examples of that. Like, for example, Steve Jobs was a great example of that. He didn't listen to anybody, right? He was like, this is it, this is how it's going to be. And by the way, Steve Jobs was fired from Apple twice, right? You have to remember, like, people don't remember this, but he was removed.
Well, I didn't know twice. I thought it was just once.
Twice.
I thought he lost control of the company the first time.
He lost control of the company and he was fired once just because of his personality. But the idea was he persisted with that, and he was an absolute genius in terms of what he thought was going to happen.
It's crazy you mentioned this. How do you? So, this is the scary part of running a tech venture, right? You lose control of your company eventually. How do you? Steve Jobs is Apple.
But Steve Jobs is I'm giving him as a bad example.
Forget Steve Jobs.
I don't think there's very few people like that who would be just so razor focused on something and be able to execute on it for years. Like, Apple was, you know, in '99, Apple's going to close down its doors, right?
Right.
And I think a lot of people know this story, but in '99 with the iMac, remember the colorful Macs?
Yeah.
They were going to close down their doors, and they literally needed $150 million to stay afloat and to be able to function. This is before iPod, which was their big hit, which has propelled them into what they are now. And Bill Gates actually was the one who gave the $150 million at that time. And so, in fact, I encourage everybody to go look at the YouTube video of that press conference that Steve Jobs did, where he brought Bill Gates onto the big screen and said, hey, we've got an investment coming in from Microsoft. We're going to work together and bring on this. And the audience that Steve had booed the entire time. Yeah. Because there was these factions. There was this Apple faction and there was this Microsoft faction. Anyway, I'm digressing into the story. The idea is, coming back to the point, was you've got to marry the really, really smart people with the people who have been around the merry-go-round a couple of times, and be able to sort of bring a balance of that. This is my opinion. Bring a balance of that into existence, because that's what it's really going to drive the company.
All right, so for the people listening or watching, we will share the link to the interview with Steve Jobs
and the 30 decks.
Well, I think that I would love that. I think that would be interesting for me.
Yeah, I'd be interested in that.
Yeah, just to see
the initial pitch.
Just to see how they've evolved over the years. It's amazing.
It's amazing. It's fascinating. Yeah. You laugh at some of them because they just look really cartoonish in early 2000s. Yeah.
Well, I'm actually now interested because I want to compare how it looks to my pitch deck.
I bet your pitch deck's better. I bet you anything your pitch deck's better.
Wow. That's the thing.
Your head's getting bigger now.
Yeah, that's the thing.
The headphones aren't going to fit.
Well, that's. I was just going to say, I think my Durban got loose a little bit there. Just got a bit of air. No, but I'm hoping I'm in those 30 pitch decks eventually, right? But no, but it's again. So do a less serious conversation. Taimoor, I know you drive. I was going to say Lambo again. You drive a McLaren. So is that a perk of working with Microsoft?
No.
The company car.
It's a company car. Don't let my boss find out.
Yeah.
No, I think I'm into cars, and I was thinking about this earlier when you were asking me, and I was like, I think a lot of people, I'm not everybody, I don't want to assume, but a lot of people have the money to buy a sports car or the car of their dreams. It's just that they prioritize it differently, right? And so, if you prioritize your money into different things, whether you're saving for something, a big house. I've never bought a house in my life, for example, right? So it really depends on how you prioritize that money and where you want to spend it. So I think it's not really that big a deal, especially not in Dubai. I think if I was to have that same car, I could never ever imagine having that car in California. It's just culturally different, right? Whereas over here in Dubai, I remember actually the first sports car I bought, and I remember driving out of the showroom with that car. It was an Audi R8. And
he says it so calmly, like it was an Audi R8.
Yeah, so it's a very nice car, and it was a dream car for me when I was younger, and especially when Iron Man came out. I don't know if you remember. That's the car he drove. So I was like, that's the car I'm going to get, and so I got it, and I drove out of the showroom, and I was feeling like $1 million, right? Because I'm driving this R8. I had a friend of mine with me, and we were both just driving down, and we stopped at a stoplight, and there was people crossing. It's in Marina, actually. People crossing, and nobody was looking at the car. And I was like, "This is kind of, it's kind of
it's demeaning."
Yeah. It's like I spent all this money on this car, and nobody's looking at it. And I noticed that there was a Ferrari parked next to me, right?
There's always a bigger fish.
Exactly. And I was like,
always a bigger
you can't get caught up with that stuff, right? And so for me, like, I think in Dubai, it's a cultural thing as well, that it just normalizes these things and people prioritize some of that. And I was just at a time in my life where I was like,
do you not find the novelty wears off a little bit? I mean, a friend of mine hired a Ferrari 458. This would be probably 5-6 years ago, and he let me take it for a spin. And
bad choice.
Phenomenal. I mean, wow, what a car, and super quick. But I must admit, I looked and I thought, I don't think I'd own one.
The novelty does not wear off.
Really? Well,
man from experiences.
I'm so sorry, but I wish that I could say that. Yeah, you kind of get done with it over.
For me, I feel like it's a hot tub. People buy a hot tub in the back garden. You get in it once, a few times, and then.
Well, I don't think I would lose interest in a hot tub in my back garden. I think I would love that.
You'd be amazed.
Yeah, you'd be amazed.
Oh.
Yeah, but I would like to say that I love having the car that I have now and the cars that I've had in the past, and I've never ever gotten bored of it.
Well, it's funny. All right. So again, for context, the reason why I mention this because you've mentioned this a couple of times to me that you're in a big car group as well in the UAE. Yeah. But before we get into that, I love the way you speak about cars because it's generally how men speak about women. Or men, I mean, whatever your thing is, right? But it's crazy. You do speak about your car like it's real. It's a actual human being.
It's interesting. It gives me joy, right? It's not at a superficial level. I love to drive, and I really love driving. And there have been times when I've been sitting at home and I've been like, you know what? I'm just going to go for a drive. And especially when the weather is good, I put the top down and I just drive. And the way that it hugs the road, and
such a California thing to do.
Control and power that goes through my foot to the engine, and the way it sounds actually gives me joy. Like I think people, underestimate that piece, especially for somebody like me who's a little bit of a petrol head, right? And so that gives me joy. I was talking, you talked about the car club. We go for drives, and there's something amazing about seeing these really high performance vehicles just going down the road together, and a common group of interest of people and who feel the same way. It's quite a thing. I have to say, like I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's more like when you go on the beach and you just got the waves and you just listen. I think it's a calming effect. Going back to your car club thing, so any other famous people that we should be talking about here?
There's no famous people, I would say, but there's some, there's a bunch of influential people. So we have some locals. I mean, it's a great group of people.
I think that's such a good thing.
Yeah, my favorite car club is run by a British guy, actually. His name is Danny, and he's been running the club for a while, and it's a great club to run.
Yeah.
He's a really good guy as well. And they've now branched off. Like I joined the club when we were 6. And we used to meet up in a small room the size in the Polo Club in Dubai Equestrian. We used to go for drives. And now he's got about 100 plus members.
Wow.
He does these.
So you guys get together, have a proper...
Yeah, we meet up for social events like drinks at Burj Al Arab or something, or we meet up for drives or track days.
I mean, if you're gonna be in a car like this, might as well have your socials in.
Now that's why I'd own a car like that, is taking it on the track, because that's often the thing. These roads are very straight, and I mean, I love that straight line speed. I mean, just my history. I owned a 1993. Toyota MR2 Mark II, which I modified up to 450 brake horsepower. Wow. So, and yes, I was part of the Toyota club at that time, and so I kind of get that buzz for sure. And,
I feel so left out right now.
Just putting your foot down. And
I prefer big cars just because of the safety issues, right? So if you hit a big car, 90% chances that you probably would survive. I made that number up. I'm assuming that's a correct number.
But how many times have somebody hit you, Jas? You got to get over that. People aren't coming out to hit you in your car.
Yeah, I know, but it's just a comfort thing as well. But
of course.
No, but let's get back on the thing. I want to have last question as well. Obviously, you don't have to limit it to 3 or 4. All right. What are the fundamental things that you should possess or have to be successful in a tech world? Why? Because again, it's a very dog eat dog world as well, right?
Yeah.
So
I think that I couldn't say that there's any fundamental things. I think one of the things that I've seen people fail at is if you're a founder or the person who's come up with this idea to do something, if you stay very disconnected from how the sausage is made, I think that gives you a little bit of it gives you a disadvantage, right? I think that if you are starting up a product or service, you should really understand the full, complete thing. And I'm not saying that founders who are technologists are generally better at doing things, but I think people who kind of compartmentalize early on, later on you have to, as it grows and becomes bigger and you have to put time. But early on, if you compartmentalize, your business function from your tech function to your marketing function to your go-to-market, I think it becomes really difficult for all those people involved to be successful. And so even people who are technologists at heart, like, oh, I'm a coder, I'm just going to sit at my keyboard and listen to heavy metal and just be writing code for 14 hours a day. I think even that is unhealthy. I think those people have to get out and figure out, okay, how is this thing going to make money? How are we going to, market it, and how are we going to do some things with it? So I think that you've got to have a good breadth of understanding. Even it doesn't have to be deep, but it has to be broad. I think that's super important and foundational for me. I think just realizing the amount of time that it's going to take, both from a day-to-day basis. And it's not a 9-to-5 job. You can't just get up and leave. You've got to be at it at all times. If you've got a great idea at 2 a.m, you've got to get up and start working on it. And also time from a longevity perspective and patience. Like let's say you built the product and you're March 1st and you're here and ready to go, but nobody's buying. You've got to stick to it. You've got to give it patience. You've got to give it a year.
And I think that's the hardest thing. And a lot of people don't have that.
Yeah. And they don't have the luxury, right? They've got other priorities like family or.
I think that is such a massive problem as well, because you've got if you're young, if you're in your 20s and you've got no one to take care of, you could put in that work. But if you've got a family and then at 35 or 40, even though I don't think age should be a thing, because
situation in life.
Yeah,
I think is
I mean, Colonel Sanders from KFC was 60, close to, was depressed, was going to commit suicide. Someone tasted his chicken, said, "This is amazing. What is this?" Sell it to people, and look at KFC now. So I don't think age is a thing. But again, the situation in your life at that particular moment, I think that dictates. If you can push at 2 o'clock in the morning, if you've got a young baby, maybe you cannot do that. So then it becomes such a big task as well.
Absolutely. So that's why you have to understand that could be, there's sacrifices, right, to be made and compromises to be made. And you have to understand that that's going to be the case. Like, one of the reasons why I wouldn't do something right now entrepreneurially is because I don't think I could deal with that at the moment. I've got a comfortable situation and I don't want to give that up.
Yeah.
But it could be a point in time in the next few years where I would say, hey, you know what? It's time to put all of this to the grinder and figure it out.
Right. Have you missed anything? I mean, this has been a great podcast so far, but have I missed anything? Do you want to add?
That's normally what we sort of say at the end. Is there any points that you would like to touch on or cover that we perhaps haven't mentioned?
No, I don't think so. I think that, I was thinking about some of the questions that Jas was asking me earlier, was also, I think that it's always important, and this is kind of interesting, right? So me and my friends, we were talking about, we have this WhatsApp group that we discuss these kinds of things, ideas and stuff. And somebody coined the term, well, they didn't coin it, I'm sure they heard it somewhere, but somebody talked about the COVID economy. And how the COVID economy has become a real thing now, where it wasn't a thing before. And while we may be pretty used to things like InstaShop and so on, there was a lot of places where it wasn't real, right? And it had to become real. We were talking about Teams and Skype and all those kinds of things before. They've become real now as well. If you go out to eat today in Dubai, you won't be given a menu. You'll be given a QR code. You'll have to scan the QR code. Yeah. That's a COVID economy thing, right? Somebody is driving the business behind putting all these QR codes and that, right? And building the website infrastructure. I went to a restaurant the other day where I could not only see the menu, but I could order from it. No waiter came to my table. I just did. And the order went straight to the kitchen. They brought the food out. I paid through the thing. It was amazing. No contact with whoever, just sit on your table. And it's such a better experience for me because I don't have to wait. I don't have to wave my hand like an idiot to a waiter or somebody, right? And so that's a COVID economy thing. Like that was we talk about in the enterprise space, we talk about digital transformation and how companies must move away from their legacy way of work into the new way of work. But we've never had a compelling event such as this that forces people to do it. All these places have been forced to adopt these new technologies and new ways of working, which some of them I hope they're here to stay forever, right? I hope I don't have to wear a mask forever for sure.
Oh yeah, that's gotta go.
Well, I mean the mask, it's a bit annoying just because, especially for me, if I'm wearing my turban, it's a bit tough to get around my ears.
But even PPE, right? For example, there's people now who are hand making masks and they're doing customized masks and so on. And this is a business that they never thought they would be in 6 months ago, but now they're making money from it, right?
Do you think it's going to continue, or do you think COVID's just all of a sudden going to disappear, and then the technology is going to have to just calm down a bit?
I think that you ask 10 people, you get 10 opinions. I think that with any virus pandemic thing, it'll kind of fade away. I remember when SARS came out, 2012, I thought it was. It was a big deal. Like people were dying, people wear masks. But it kind of faded away. I never got vaccinated for SARS or anything like that.
No, I don't think it was such a big deal anyway for the.
It was localized. It was a big deal in China. It was a big deal in Asia in general.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. That's why the vaccination thing didn't become such a big deal. For example, here. Yeah.
It's still around. It's just weaker now.
It's
And I think we're seeing that with COVID now, right, as well, where it's getting weaker and so on. So I don't know what will happen. I'm not a doctor of any sorts, but I think that
so I'm not going to give my opinion on this.
No, don't.
But I think that's why I said if you ask 10 people, they'll have 10 opinions on it. Yeah. But I think that some of the technology things that have changed with COVID, I have, for example, like Microsoft has said nobody goes to the office till the 1st of Jan. There's Airbnb has said work from home till August 2021.
Wow.
Right. And so I think some of these things, and people are reevaluating their real estate choices, right? Do we really need for to have these massive offices in these large cities for
They can
people to
work
come in to be able
remotely.
to, where they can work from remotely. Maybe we can hire better people, different people, culturally diverse people, more globally spread people to be able to service companies like that now, because working from home isn't really, we have the tools, we have the technology, we've proven it now. And so that compelling event, I think, is really exciting, especially in the space that I'm in already. So I'm super excited to see how much of that persists and where that takes us. I think it is going to make the global job market actually much more accessible, because when people start hiring again, they're not going to be like, oh, we need you in our office in Mississippi. You know, you could be, if you're sitting in, Amsterdam, sure, if that's where you want to live.
Yeah.
So
I wouldn't mind living in Amsterdam, actually.
We know why.
The sceneries.
Yeah, of
the
course.
canals.
And the canals, yeah, of course.
So
and
I
the
think
museums.
so I'm excited to see what comes about from there. Yeah.
Brilliant. We do this with at the end of the podcast anyway. So if
Take my clothes off.
Well, after a couple of drinks maybe, but no. Jokes apart, we what we do this is we whoever's listening, we give them the option to get in touch with us if they've got any questions regarding the podcast itself or starting up a tech platform.
So more so comments and things. So it'll be posted up on YouTube and various platforms. So any
they can get in touch with you.
questions or whatever, that can be viewed by all of us, and perhaps people can reach out to you directly then.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
that's the aim of the podcast.
I'm happy
anyway.
to do it.
Oh, brilliant! There you go. So that's what we wanted anyway. Taimoor was happy to do this. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, please do ask us in the comments. Let us know what you think, and let us know what you think of Taimoor's beard as well.
This is new. The beard and the ponytail is COVID again. COVID economy.
Well, I mean that's a lot better than what other people are doing. All right, so the baby boom that's happening. So that's a lot better than.
I tried the TikTok thing; it didn't work, so I did the hair. But I'm happy to drop my email, and I'll be in the comment section, hanging around as well, because I'm interested to hear what people are saying.
Brilliant, lovely,
great. Taimoor, thank you very much. I was rather quiet in this podcast, but I must admit I was very captivated by you. Actually, I really wanted to listen, because the tech side of thing I don't really know a lot about. So that was that's probably why I didn't.
Well, that happened with me with the sales part. So when we had someone from sales, George.
I was all over him.
And this gentleman, and they were. I'm just sitting in the middle. I'm like, whoa, tennis match. I'm gonna keep looking at what's happening here, because you learn. I mean, that's the point of this podcast, is to give people
value.
Yeah, a platform where they can talk about their businesses. People don't talk about SMEs here.
Yeah,
SMEs is generally the backbone of any economy in any country. Yep. But people don't talk about them. People talk about the Apples, the Amazons. But this is what we want to do anyway with this podcast. Obviously, have interesting people like you on board as well. Have a bit of comedy.
I think this is great what you guys are doing. I'm super excited. I hope you publish it soon so I can listen to them.
Oh, brilliant.
We will do.
Thank you so much. Thank you again,
Thanks,
Taimoor.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.